and welcome back to another episode of Life After Kids with Doctors Brooke and Lynne. I'm Dr. Brooke.
I'm Dr. Lynne.
Thank you, ladies, for joining us again today for another episode. I'm so excited. I don't know if I'm excited about this, actually.
Yeah, because you're a boy mom.
I have 3 boys.
Yes.
And tell them what we're talking about.
So we're talking about boys and the differences when boys get married versus girls get married, right? We're calling it gain a son, lose a son.
Yeah.
Right? I know. It doesn't have to be that way, though.
No.
So we're going to talk about it.
And I mean, we're stereotyping here big time.
Totally.
So, there is that. In every situation and scenario is different. But how many moms have we had reach out to us and say this thing?
Yeah.
That their son got married or their son is dating and they don't see enough of them. And for sure, and I'm just like being very honest here, we never knew what we were having. When I was pregnant, we never knew what we were going to have. It was always a surprise because I felt like knowing early was like opening up the Christmas present before Christmas morning. So I just didn't want to know. And I had every single pregnancy I thought for sure was a girl. So no intuition there at all. And by the second boy, when we were pregnant with the third, I thought for sure AJ was a girl. And always had that sense in my mind of like, I love my boys. I would not have it any other way. But as a mom, there was that pull on me, like, what's going to happen? And now that they're older, I think about it. Like, I have the 3 boys. They're going to go and leave their mom and live their life.
So at Life After Kids, we're all about staying in our zone of control, right? And there's 2 ways that we could look at this. We can complain about our kids, maybe our boys getting older and choosing their wife's family or choosing their wives over us. Or we can start now to look at that whole dynamic and see what are the ways that we can encourage and foster continued relationships, because there are, at the end of the day, there are differences between boys and girls.
Absolutely.
That we're not going to be able to change. And there's probably going to be complaints on both sides, right?
100%.
As a mother-in-law, when you have 2 families, when your children grow up, get married, then there's 2 families and then their core family to think about. There's somebody will usually get the short end of the stick at some point. Everybody will get it, right?
I would think so, yes. And by the way, let's not make too big a generalizations, because it could go both ways. You could have a daughter that ends up, I think we see it more and we hear more from the community that it's typically the son.
Yeah.
And that is definitely like a generalization stereotype.
It's because if you've done a good job raising a boy into a man, he's going to prioritize his family. That's what we would hope for them. Do you think it's because when a man gets married, his priority then becomes his wife?
Right. And I think that and this is, again, every family and every dynamic is different, but very often a mother-daughter relationship is a tight one. Maybe a different relationship, right, than a mother-son.
Type of relationship.
So there would maybe be that tendency for the daughter to be closer to her mother.
Yeah.
And to sort of bring her husband along then with her family and her dynamic,
yes.
Right?
Sometimes understanding it helps, though.
It does, yeah, and I always find these conversations with you, even off camera, interesting to sort of talk through and talk out. Honestly, we do. We can go there and just sort of try, because we want to understand better, right?
When you know better, you do better.
Right, exactly. But at the end of the day, I know my own heart and my own thoughts with my 3 boys concerned, and I've had this concern for, it's more now that they're getting older, like, oh, they're boys, they're going to leave and they're going to be with their wives and their wives' family. We've had other moms write in and say the same thing. And I remember even talking to Paula, your sister, because she has 2 boys in Florida, and they were, getting serious with their dating. And I said the same thing. How do you feel about it? She goes, what is that? She goes, I know. She's like, I can't even think about it, but I do worry that my boys, they're sons and they're going to leave.
So I have a boy and a girl, and I just had this realization that I will probably be a very different mother-in-law to both of my children.
Interesting.
And the reason is, and this is just personally not anything I was asked to do, even unspoken, by my daughter-in-law. She's amazing.
Yeah,
she's a very good mother. She's a very devoted wife, and I really have no complaints, but at all, and I shouldn't. But coming into that relationship, I had a sense early on, and I am a step parent too, so let's keep that in mind. But I think it was really more the boy situation. I had a sense very early on that I should not overstep her. That it can be with women, we can tend to have that territorial type of situation going on, and maybe that's some of it. But I believe that our relationship is good today because I defer to her. And that's got to be a tough situation when you're the mom for these boys their whole life. You're the number one woman in their life. And then you all of a sudden take a back seat. That sounds so harsh, but for lack of a better term.
But yeah, and that's an interesting, and maybe that's some of what it is. It gets tricky because it's this, it's the mother-son relationship that then goes to the son-wife relationship, right? And that's probably is a lot of it.
Yeah, I don't think it's healthy if you want that relationship with your son and his family. If there's any sort of power struggle, it's going to make that difficult. And I think that's where a lot of mom-in-laws lose out. A lot of moms in our situation will lose out because if you're wanting to fight for that power, you don't ever want your child to have to choose between you and their family.
No.
Right? Their wife. That's an impossible choice.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, they should choose their spouse.
Right? If we've done a good job raising them,
right. I'm assuming it's not an abusive or horrible situation. Correct. But, we raise them to leave the home and to start their own family separate from ours. I mean,
it's a bit of a humbling experience, and you just may have to let go.
Yeah.
And be there and be more selfless again. As moms, we think maybe we can start to think about ourselves. We definitely can, but in those situations where there's a potential power struggle, I think it's best to be selfless and try and show up and help as much as you can.
Yeah.
And maybe possibly give a lot more than you're getting back at times. I hear that a lot in our community about children not giving enough. And when people are immature, and I'm not saying they're immature for their age, but they're in their 20s. They're figuring life out.
Absolutely.
And they may not have it all where they can do the job and do the family and have enough left over to give as much as you're hoping that they will.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
It's a really tricky thing. And to your point, when Ken and I got married, he had a conversation early on with his mom and would just basically laid it out. The reason I share that is because you kind of just alluded, that's kind of what you were saying is you've got to let the wife be the wife now and step back. And anyway, in fairness to his mom, she never, after that conversation, did not, she let us, she let us live our life.
Close to her.
And I
included her. And
oh my gosh, she was like a second mom. I included her. I always wanted her around in everything, and she helped us. She was such a blessing in our life. It was wonderful. And I think the reason why I wanted to have this conversation on this episode is because the conversation that we had in our mastermind or accountability group, right, where one of the members, he's actually the only guy on the call, and he was saying that his mother had 4 boys. Mm-hmm. 4 boys, and she had prepped herself, and she still says this, from the time they were little, and then when they got older and getting married, she prepped herself that she knew in life the way things worked was if you have sons, you lose a son. And the wife's family gains a son. Lose a son, gain a son. And that's just the way it was. So she had herself prepped for that they weren't going to be around. They would be spending their time with their wives' families. And she was going to live the life, make her life as fulfilling as it could be because she was preparing herself for that.
Beautiful.
And I was like, wow. And when he first said that, lose a son, gain a son on the other side, I was like, I don't want to have this conversation. Stephen, don't even go there. Because in my mind, I'm like, I have my 3 boys and I don't want to hear you say she didn't see them. She had to prepare herself for that. But what he ended up saying was beautiful because he said, in her doing that, in her letting go and putting stock in her own life and making herself fulfilled and happy outside of the connection there, what it actually did was bring her kids back around to her.
Yeah.
And they're more than involved in her life. She does everything with them.
Yeah, I think he said she has 4 boys and 4 families and 4 daughters now, right? With the wives that dote on her.
Yes.
And she on them, really.
Right.
She takes good care of them too.
And that's why I really wanted to have this conversation, because it's like this with so many things in life. Like we can connect the dots here, as we always do with so many things, because sometimes you have to let go.
Absolutely.
For it to come back around and you to really live
that old adage.
fuller
If you
life.
Love something, let it go.
You have to let it go. And I think that part of the issue is and we've talked about this so much on so many posts, and it's so hard, but if we can't learn to let go and we're trying to get all of our joy and all of our connection and all of our meaning in life solely on our kids and then their families, that can be a recipe for actually pushing them away.
Absolutely. The more you try, I have written here, the more you try to hold on or place expectations or demand time, the more it is likely to backfire, because that's a push and pull, that law of, somebody's trying to cling on to you. What are you going to do? You're going to resist that, right? So it's that process of letting go that allows them to come to you, but in this new adult way, which is even really cool. That's a new layer that many of us haven't experienced yet, where we can look forward to, that we'll have this new layer of having our adult children be almost friends and on par, in many ways.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you're having to nag at your kids to spend time with you or to call you or to have you have you around, that's not a good place to be.
No, and we hear it a lot. And but again, you don't ever have control over another human being.
Right.
Even your adult children. So we can't, that's a recipe for so much frustration, to just stay there or feel jilted or feel like you're lacking that. The best place, the most mature, healthy way for you to rise above that is to take that energy and put that into what you can do to foster those relationships. Because I think at the end of the day, what we're seeing through this conversation is it's not just a relationship with you and your son. It's a relationship. It's very important, the dynamic between you and your daughter-in-law.
Maybe even more important, if you want your relationship with your son to be good.
Yes. And how, if you can get to that place where you can let her shine in that family and not try to overstep. Again, having your own identity outside of being a mom, because if that is our only sole identity, then we're going to we're not even going to be able to help ourselves. We're going to rush in to try to intervene.
Yes.
So we have to think of ourselves outside of that, even though that's always going to be our primary and our best role.
Yeah, I think that's probably our biggest hiccup, is wanting to. And I can imagine, and I know you've seen some of this, because I walked, because you have grandkids. So I can imagine there's a whole nother level. Just take away just the relationship with your child and their spouse. But then you're watching them parent in ways that maybe you wouldn't parent or don't think is best. And I think there's a line between, and we talked about this in another episode with just helping your kids sort out decisions. There's a line between speaking up when you need to, if it's going to be beneficial, but also, like, you're not the parent. You have to
There's been a couple times we've interjected, but we get the sense, and they're such good parents, and they also have a very strong front. So I think that helps. When there's a good relationship there, you just sort of know that it's being
not my place.
It's being handled, not your place. And but I think it's just the old, the good advice is only give it if you're asked for it, right? So that just tends to work best for us. And again, I'm the step mom, but I mean, I've been in his life his whole life, and pretty much, and he works with us, and we have a lot of interaction with him as a family. And I don't label it as a stepchild in our interactions, and I would hope that they don't feel that. It's just for context, I guess.
Sure. No, and I've never ever heard you say that until maybe this conversation right
Oh,
now. I've never
yeah.
heard you call him my step. It's
No,
always my son.
no, I've always kind of taken issue with that because I think I love that phrase like bonus parent or that's great,
Yeah.
right? Because you also want to give respect to
The parents.
mom.
Yeah.
Yep. And yep. So
Of course. But you know that there too, like I've watched your relationship develop over the years from when they were dating to them engaged, married, and then kids. And I think that you and Mark are a perfect example of
hands
you
off.
guys, yeah. I mean, you let go. You're not in their face. You're not demanding time. You're not like yearning to spend more time. You're living your life and making the best life
Yeah.
you can live. And because of that, this kind of draws them to you.
Well, thank you. Nobody's perfect, but I do think it comes down to the examples that you were given, and it's going to be easier for some people to do that than others.
Mm-hmm.
And you do have to look at your own mom or your, maybe your own mother-in-law and just evaluate that. And I think always prioritize what you want out of this. Do you want pride? Do you want to be right? Do you want to get your little dig in? Or do you want a great relationship with your children, right? Do you want them to come to you and ask for advice and really see it in their eyes that they want it, right? Like, what is it that you want? And I think that's where we can tend to let our feelings in the moment dictate our behaviors. And there are some certain things, family, usually we can stay intact in terms of like we still love each other, but those things that we do and the ways that we hurt each other, sometimes we'll do that more willingly with our family than we would with other people. And it does cause damage. So I think that I had a really good example of that. My parents were very boundary sensitive to that. Very much so. I mean, probably to an extreme, I would say. Like my sister was married at 27 to her boyfriend that she'd been going out with for 10 years. But I mean, he was treated well, but not taken into the family. I mean, he'd been in our lives for 10 years until they were married.
Yeah.
And that was, again, just how we did it in our house. It wasn't necessarily right or the way that you would want to do it. But I think that if you can just look to the people in your life that have, maybe it's not your parents, maybe your mom and dad did a terrible job of that, and maybe your mom intervened in your relationship and caused some trouble, but who in your life can you look to that does a decent job of that,
right?
And study that a little bit for some clues and some help.
Yeah, success leaves clues, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting that you tie that back to your parents.
Yes. And I do think that's where my sense of like you have to have something going on for yourself comes from as well. Because in my family it was a case of the children are going to leave and again, you let them go. And we keep coming back for more. It's true. It's very much like Stephen Giannopoulos, my mom. We want her to stay longer. And she's like, nope, I'm out of here. I'm going to go.
Yeah. Isn't that a nice place to be? Not for you, maybe if you want her to stay, but if you're the grandmother or the,
yes. I believe she feels very wanted, but she's also a very selfless person. I don't know if most of us would be able to get to, myself included, to that place. But if you want to study somebody who, has success in that area, Steve G's mom and her, the common thing that I see there is just a copious amount of selflessness. Like just put their children first and would never insert themselves on that child.
Yeah.
To their fault in some cases, right?
But let's clarify that, because when you say put the child first, to me that could be misconstrued of like their whole world's revolving around them.
Yes. So no, it was the opposite. It was the case of the child needs, like, we need like autonomy in our family. We need them not to intervene with us as adults. You need to go live your life.
Yes. So you're saying selfless from the standpoint of what's best for the kid, yes, which is they're living their life and I need to take a step back and let them go do that. I'm here when they need me, but yes, I'm going to be over here and living my life.
And also when I am with them, I'm going to make their life easier.
Yeah.
So it's the typical example of, the cooking and the cleaning and the helping and the taking the children, and that, if you have the opportunity to do that, remember when you were little kids in the house, and like how just getting a 5-minute break, was everything. I mean, again, there need to be boundaries because there has to be give and take, right? But when somebody gives more, you have the tendency then to want to return that favor, the law of reciprocity. If somebody's giving to you, you have the tendency to want to get that back if you're a good person.
Yeah.
And I know your children are. So that was some of the points that we made in the post, is just try by giving first and see what happens. Unfortunately, you have to give without expecting back.
Right.
But
right, because that's not the reason you want to do it.
It's not the reason you give, because that's manipulative in a sense. It can be construed that way.
Right.
And your child will be like, well, they're just doing that to get this back. And if they sense that, it will backfire.
Right. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. But I think at the end of the day, one of the points you brought up earlier is the most important, which is you cannot control other people. And that's a tough thing here, because we're so used to when our kids were little and under the house, you had a certain amount of control. You could have them more under your thumb. But at this point, the only person you can control is yourself in your own life.
Yep.
And so
that's the theme in all of our conversations.
Right.
But it's the healthiest, sanest place to be.
Absolutely.
In your life after kids.
Is live your own life.
Yep.
There has to be a practice of letting go.
Yep.
A little bit of selflessness with them.
Yeah.
And finding your fulfillment and joy. Not that we don't, that doesn't subside how much joy we get from our kids. We should, but we also have to find it from other places.
Outside.
Because when your kids see you living your best life and really thriving and enjoying, that's a magnet. That draws them to you. Not just them, just like it draws anybody else. Everybody wants to be around people that are living a meaningful, purposeful, joyful life, right? That's magnetism at its finest. And it will do the same for your kids.
Yeah. Nobody wants to be forced to have somebody spend time with them, right? You don't want that either. You really don't want what you're saying. You're saying you want your kid to spend more time with you or prioritize you more. You're saying you don't want to have to ask for that. You want that to happen effortlessly.
Right.
And so in order for that to happen effortlessly, you have to do the things that attract that person to that. Even your children. It works the same. We're humans, right? It's human behavior.
100%.
How we work and think. So
absolutely.
Woo!
That was a doozy.
That one.
We sure did. I hope you all found that helpful and useful. I think it's helped me. I mean, these perspectives, even that day we had that conversation with Steve G, it just, for me, with 3 boys, is so helpful in a totally different perspective. So I hope it has helped you as much. Definitely make sure you're following us, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. The website is www.lifeafterkids.com. If you prefer to watch over listen, go to YouTube. We have a brand new setup, so it's nice and pretty aesthetically. And thank you again for joining us. Give us feedback. Make sure you're DMing us, and just have a great day, ladies.
Thank you so much. Big hugs.
Amount of control. You could have them more under your thumb. But at this point, the only person you can control is yourself in your own life.
Yep.
And so
that's the theme in all of our conversations.
Right.
But it's the healthiest, sanest place to be.
Absolutely.
In your life after kids.
Is live your own life.
Yep.
There has to be a practice of letting go.
Yep.
A little bit of selflessness with them.
Yeah.
And finding your fulfillment and joy. Not that we don't, that doesn't subside how much joy we get from our kids. We should, but we also have to find it from other places.
Outside.
Because when your kids see you living your best life and really thriving and enjoying, that's a magnet. That draws them to you. Not just them, just like it draws anybody else. Everybody wants to be around people that are living a meaningful, purposeful, joyful life, right? That's magnetism at its finest. And it will do the same for your kids.
Yeah. Nobody wants to be forced to have somebody spend time with them, right? You don't want that either. You really don't want what you're saying. You're saying you want your kid to spend more time with you or prioritize you more. You're saying you don't want to have to ask for that. You want that to happen effortlessly.
Right.
And so in order for that to happen effortlessly, you have to do the things that attract that person to that. Even your children. It works the same. We're humans, right? It's human behavior.
100%.
How we work and think. So
Absolutely.
Woo!
That was a doozy.
Unpack that one.
We sure did. I hope you all found that helpful and useful. I think it's helped me. I mean, these perspectives, even that day we had that conversation with Steve G, like,
yes,
it just, for me, with 3 boys, is so helpful in
Yeah.
a totally different perspective. So I hope it has helped you as much. Definitely make sure you're following us, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. The website is www.lifeafterkids.com. If you prefer to watch over listen, go to YouTube. We have a brand new setup, so it's nice and pretty aesthetically. And thank you again for joining us. Give us feedback. Make sure you're DMing us, and just have a great day, ladies.
Thank you so much. Big hugs.